All right. Good afternoon, you guys. Thank you for joining me. I always love it when we can get a few people here. I didn't do a good job of advertising this one, but I am recording it and I hope to get it uploaded if I don't destroy the video tragically somehow. As always, if you attend any of the sessions, I share a lot of things. A lot of things are already uploaded. There might be a couple things I'll upload. In the chat, I'm sure some people will help me put the link to that, and I'll share a QR code in a little bit as well. I am Sara Werf. I'm the MDE Academic Standards Specialist for math, and I am really excited to talk to you about one of my favorite topics. Prior to coming to MDE, I traveled for a living and I stayed in hotel rooms a lot. And those hotel rooms came with a variety of quirks. And some of these pictures I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But I'm always going to connect the things that I'm doing to standards. And sometimes that will be our current standards, which run through the spring of 2027. And or they can be related to the new standards, which are finally official. If you didn't hear, about a month and a half ago, they became official and in law, and they'll be fully implemented in this fall of 2027, tested on in the spring of 2028. So I am today going to connect things to 2022 standards, but I could easily connect it to the new standards. And everything I'm doing today is not curriculum specific. It can be used with anything. It is not anything that you have to be, like, you could do this with building thinking classrooms, or you could do this with any type of classroom decisions that you do. And it's one of my favorite things that I started doing in my classroom. So I'm glad that you're here. One of the things that MDE is always trying to do is improve conditions for learning. And I really, really believe that if you got serious about what I'm going to share with you today, it could improve conditions for learning for all students. And this particular webinar, I have real life pictures from my real life classroom of things that happened to me. I'm going to share a couple stories of things that I got right in my teaching career and things that I definitely got wrong in my teaching career, and then what I did about that. So as I said, all things are shared. There's a QR code for those of you attending lives. It's in the chat. If you missed it, someone will put it there for you. I'll share this again one more time at the end. When the recording is up and available, you can find it in two places. You can find it on the MCTM YouTube channel, or you can see the links here. And when I share things, I share not just the videos, but in the description to the video, and in the folders will be things like PLCs. I also have a protocol for how you can do what I'm sharing with you today, and then tons of links and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to use this with people in your sphere of influence, there's lots of easy ways to do that and adapt it. So I have used this picture a lot with you if you've attended anything that I've done, but really this picture came from Laura Wegeman related, and it's a picture I've been using a lot when I do trainings with multilingual learners, because there are 6 things happening simultaneously in this picture that are all great instruction for multilingual learners, and that require us to build those habits in our students. And I'm not going to talk about all 6 today, but I have taken those things and tried to build them into my own classroom. These are my own students. I'm going to be telling stories about the students at this high school in this session. And one of my core values is that all students, all of them, will every single day talk out loud about mathematics, every single class period. And so really, I've been on a mission for the last 30 years of my career, is how do I create the conditions so they feel safe enough to do that, and they feel like they have the skills to engage in discourse, because it's not their fault if they're not engaging in discourse. Is something that I need to change. And so there's a lot of things that I do to help with that. I'm always going to advertise when I'm talking about this topic. Probably the best article everyone should read every single year is an article. It's an oldie, but a goodie. Never say anything a kid can say. I threw it into the folder for you if you wanted to read this. This is an old NCTM article. Your favorite math educator, this is their favorite article. So like Robert Kaplinski tweets this out all the time, and lots of other people as well. So I showed you a picture of a shower and a sink. And I'm going to start with the shower because if you take a look at that shower, I have a father that's very disabled. And when we moved them into a townhome, one of the things we did is we put bars up everywhere. This is not my dad's house, but there's a bar there to help you in the shower. There's support for you in that shower. But I don't know if you notice where they put that bar. What it doesn't allow is a hot shower. So we're supporting one thing, but we're not getting it done in other areas of our life. And so today I'm going to tell you a story about something that happened to me over 30 years ago in the first school that I ever taught at. And you may have heard this story before if you've ever heard me talk. I started teaching at what at the time was considered the worst high school in Minnesota. I was 20 something, and I was in Minneapolis public schools. And I'm so old that there was no MCAs. There was something called the 8th grade basic standards test. Well, I see a head nod, so somebody must remember the days of the basic standards test. And this was a test you had to pass to graduate that you took the first time in 8th grade, and you had to keep taking it every year. And I got 4 sections of all the 11th graders and 12th graders in the building who had not passed that test yet. And I had their second math class of the day, and my job was to prepare them for the 8th grade basic standards test, which, by the way, the content of that course would be today's current 6th grade standards. And so I got this huge, big red binder. I didn't have a computer in those days that St. Paul had put together, and I opened it up. And this is the first question that I asked 80 students in my 4 sections. This is what I asked them. If John earns $4,000 a month, what is his annual income? And I want you to guess how many of my 80 students got that question right. They were 11th and 12th graders. They had been identified as struggling because they were in this class because they needed to pass this 8th grade test. John earns $4,000 per month. What is his annual income? By the way, I did allow them to have a calculator, like they had tools in front of them. And the answer, if you didn't know, was none of them. Not a single one of the 80 students that day got that question right. Luckily, this was not my first year of teaching. This was like my 3rd year of teaching. This is one of the days where I got it right that day. I made a good decision that day. I thought there is no way that all 80 students don't know how to do this problem. And so I said, in my head, I'm like, it must have something to do with the word annual. I bet they don't know what the word annual means. And so I changed the questions to this. If John earns $4,000 per month, how much does he earn in a year? And what do you know? All 80 students got the question right. Why do I tell you this story? For a couple of reasons. If I had stopped here and not thought about the word annual, I probably would have been like, oh my goodness, these kids can't multiply. And I would have given them worksheet after worksheet and to work on the multiplication, and I would have been treating the wrong thing. And the answer wasn't they didn't know how to multiply. The answer is they didn't know some of the academic vocabulary. And I didn't know what to do, so I made a mistake. And even though I knew it had to do with the word annual, and that was a big thing, I call annual the word that changed the trajectory of my career. But I made a mistake at that point. I was teaching some Algebra 2 at that point, and I was like, oh my goodness, if they don't know annual, I can't say what is the coefficient of the quadratic term. They'll never know what I mean. And so I started just saying, instead of those words, I got rid of that and I started saying, hey students, what's the number in front of x squared? And they all could do things. They did well on tests, but it was a mistake because then they would leave my classroom and were unprepared when they left my classroom. Luckily in those days, I was across the hall from an EL teacher. And, my students knew that if they would wait long enough, we, the teachers, would rescue them. And that's what I did for a couple of years of my career. I just rescued them. And I did all the heavy lifting for them. I used simple language, and it ended up being a mistake. And by the way, I see teachers do it all the time. We over scaffold, we over support, and then we leave them handicapped in the end, and they don't get a hot shower. So the ELs, in my I had an EL teacher across the hall from me in those days, an ESL teacher, and she said, Sarah, let me tell you something about our EL students, our multilingual learners. They need to interact with the word, not hear it, interact with it at least 15 times in order to know the word. And so there's research to support this, and you need to do specific things, and you need to do a lot of things. And then she started giving me some ideas, and I have some hidden slides here if you want to go back and look at them. Over the last 30 years, I have read everything I could find in the card catalog in those days, and I can Google these days on the computer about best practices of teaching multilingual learner students in the math classroom. So much so that I've been considered a national expert on this topic. I'm not EL trained, but I have spent a lot of time studying this and looking at the best research on this. And it turns out the research for this is not only good for multilingual learner students, but it's also good for all students. But particularly students who often, some of the students in poverty have some of the same low language needs that our multilingual learners students need. So fast forward 20 or 30 years later, I'm teaching at a different high school in Minnesota, in South Minneapolis. And it's the first week of school, and I'm working in our school's room where students can come down and get help during the day. So it's the first week of school, and in walks the student. And I said, hey, how can I help you? And this student says, I'm in pre-calculus, and we got our first homework assignment. And in my head, I could feel myself making a unconscious judgment about the student, like, oh, visibly the student is not the typical student that you see in pre-calculus. But I threw that away and I said, great, I'd love to help you. The student opened their book, and this is what their book looked like. And when I looked in the book, the student and I did something that took less than 30 minutes, or not 30 minutes, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. And the student said, because the student said, I don't know how to do any of this. And I did something that took 15 seconds. And the student said out loud, oh, I know exactly what to do. And the student sat down and did this whole thing perfectly and moved on. Had I not been 30 years ago, started to get training on this, I would have made a mistake on this day, and I would have misdiagnosed the student. So at the end of this session, I will tell you what I did with the student, but you're going to have to wait. But what I really want you to know is often what we do when it comes to language and reading is we put too much scaffolding there, and we take away opportunities from students to solve their own things. We make them dependent on us, as opposed to Zaretta Hammond. A lot of her work is around creating independent learners. And so I'm going to share with you my best tip for vocabulary and words like annual and just language in general. But first, I'm going to talk about some things that don't work. Keywords. Too often I see people teaching keywords. It doesn't work. Super fast. You can Google why it doesn't work. There's lots of stuff out there. But I go into lots of classrooms and see stuff like this up on the walls, and we think we're helping our students. But guess what? Everybody that writes tests knows these lists, and they write questions like this. Annie takes away 3 cookies from her brother. She puts the cookies in a pile that originally had 7. How many cookies does Annie have? Guess what? You do not want to subtract to solve this problem, even though the word takeaway is there. And so, do these words sometimes lend to that particular operation? Yes, but it's a trick, and we want students to reason things out. Another thing I want to talk to you about that sometimes works, but almost never works in the rooms that I go into is word walls. Here's why. Most word walls look something like this. There are a lot of visual noise. They're up there, and it makes you look like you're doing something. In fact, administrators will walk in and be like, whoa, they got a word wall. And they'll be all impressed. But you know who's not using it? The students who don't know these words. And so most of the word walls I see are ineffective and aren't being used. There are some exceptions to this, There are teachers who are putting up just small concept walls related to the current stuff they're teaching. It's not the whole year's worth of stuff, and it's just a limited amount of words, and it usually involves visuals of some kinds. Um, it might look something like this that you co-craft with your students, but it's definitely related to the things that you're doing, and when you learn new things, you move on. I have some multilingual learner friends, and they've shared with me some word walls shoulds. If you want to go back and take a look at this, there's definitely some shoulds and some shoulds nots, but don't assume because you have a word wall, you've solved your language issue. Here's one classroom that I was in, and it was super effective. This was a room that was lucky enough to have two teachers in it. They on the far right, you can see the core classroom teacher, and on the far left, you can see the half body of the multilingual learner teacher. And as the core teacher was teaching instruction to these middle schoolers, the multilingual teacher was doing several things, but one of the things they were doing was pointing to words on the word wall and just standing there and holding that point that you saw the teacher using. So I want to design to help you think how we could design things for success in our classroom and not like this thing. Like, I don't know who put this together, but that's never going to work for us. It's going to be a big mess. And that's what my classroom was early on, was a big mess. And so as we're thinking about this, I want you to think about how we can engage or build curiosity and a wanting to do things in all of our students in learning, how we might accelerate learning for students, how we might simultaneously teaching grade level materials and future materials, and how we might center students, like design the class so our decision making puts the students in the center of our students, but we also take our students and make them feel like they're powerful mathematicians. So a couple things, if you want to Google the research that's the most used research on this and you want to do a deep dive like I've been doing, this is the research currently in mathematics that everyone's using. It's out of Stanford Graduate School. Scale, SCALE, has put out the most current research where they say it is super important to be teaching the language of mathematics at the same time as math. They're not separate things or things we should be teaching simultaneously. They have 4 designed principles in the tools that they put together, and those things go after these 6 modalities. Remember I said in that picture there were 6 things going on? There are 6 types of language that we need to build in students. In October, I did the first webinar in this series, and I told you about one of their reading routines, the 3-act routine, and that builds reading. But there's lots of other routines that build representing things, conversing with other people, writing, listening, speaking. All of those things have to be taught. Students don't arrive to us being able to do those things in math. Certainly they can speak. They can't speak about mathematics unless we help them build those skills. So today we're talking about reading and a little bit of other things. So how might we teach math and language simultaneously? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you about. So again, in October, I talked about the 3 reads, but in this session, we're going to talk about discussion supports. It's called Math Language Routine number 8. Again, it's something you can totally Google. It comes out of Stanford's 8 math language routine. If you expand math language routine 8, the discussion supports, there's a lot of them, and I'm only going to talk about one of them today, pairing language. I am going to touch on 2 or 3 others, but the main one I'm going to talk about is pairing terms. I'm going to tell you right now, if teachers were really good with all of these, no, a lot of teachers use some of these, but they're not good at them yet. But if teachers were really good at using all of these, they would start to see the outcomes in their class change and start seeing students engage even more. And this is good for all students. So I'm going to focus on pairing terms. And by the way, I've already paired terms with you today. Remember this slide from earlier? When I was doing it, I was pairing the term engage with supporting curiosity and interest. I was pairing the term accelerate with simultaneously teaching grade level and previous learning. And I was talking about centering your students, of shifting the focus from teachers to the students and their individual needs. So let's talk about pairing language. And I'm going to give you lots of definitions. But basically, it's pairing academic terms with casual definitions. So here's how everyone should start. This is what I did in my high school classroom. I said, everybody, click, 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 click. And I want you to imagine what students did when I said this. Everybody, take out a pen. I want you to write down as quick as you can 2 integers whose product is 12. I don't know if you know what happened in my classroom, but the vast majority of students, not just multilingual students, but the vast majority of students, as I'm seeing in the chat, said, huh? What are you talking about? And so I then changed it quickly and said, hey, students, write down numbers that multiply to give you 12. And guess what? They're all totally okay. What's the difference? Academic language, casual definitions. So what is pairing terms? Well, this mistake 1 in our classroom is we only use casual language, but mistake 2 is we only use precise language. Both are not effective. And so what are we going to do to design for success? Let's pair language. And so this is what, starting 30 some years ago, I started doing a little bit. And then 30 years later, I do it 100 times every class that I teach. I now am so good at this, I don't even have to think about it. I just do it because I've been doing it forever. It was hard in the beginning, but it looks something like this. Hey, students, I'd like you to write down 2 integers, numbers that are not decimals or fractions that have a product or multiply to 12. Actually, that's not really what I do. That's too many words. This is really what I say. Hey, students, write down 2 integers, 2 numbers that have a product or multiply to 12. What we're doing simultaneously is building their academic language, and we're just defining it as we go along. That's pairing language. If you've never intentionally done this, I also would not do what you see in front of you. I would limit yourself to pairing 1 thing per sentence at most. You have to start small. It'll take a while before you can get as good as I've gotten. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I just got 30 years head start on most teachers in pairing language. So a long time ago, I brought this to LA Unified School District when I was working with teachers there. And the next time I flew out to work with them, they're like, could you turn that into a protocol? I'm not a big fan of protocol, but if you work with people that want a protocol for this, I'll give you a protocol for this. It looks something like this. Don't even start pairing language till you've made a class norm that every student speaks out loud about math. Who cares if you're building language until you've made that norm? And don't start it until you've created the conditions for creating discourse in your classroom. And one of the best ways to do that is safe questions. I'll touch on that in a couple minutes. The third thing you got to do before you can even do this is identify the vocab, the academic words, and you need to have them front and center. For me, I put them on a Post-it note and I kept them on my computer or right where I was standing when I was teaching. 3 or 4, you want to use them not just with yourself, but with students. If a student uses a casual term or academic terms, you're going to pair it back to them, their words with the opposite of whatever they used. I'll show you that in just a little bit. And you're going to revoice student language by pairing those terms. You'll see me do this, and I'll come back to this graphic in a little bit. But you're also going to pair things that aren't vocabulary. You're going to pair notation. You're going to pair contextual words, non-math terms like annual. And then you're going to do some stuff with color, and I'm going to talk about that and give you some examples. So my mistakes early on was I just used simple language. But if I wanted to change that today, it would look something like this in my algebra room. Hey, students, what's the leading coefficient? And I want you to guess what I'm going to say in my mind. Hey, students, what's the leading coefficient What's the number that multiplies with x squared in the expression? And then I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to point at that thing. And I'm going to make a big deal out of this because I didn't learn this till about 10 years ago. Not only am I going to point at it, I'm going to do what I call hold the point. Because students who are fragile in language are usually so busy taking notes that by the time they look up from what they're doing, you're no longer pointing at the thing that would have helped them. And so in a lot of classrooms, teachers just aren't pointing long enough and doing things. So it's not only what I'm saying, it's I'm going to give some visual clues and I'm going to hold it. Remember this teacher in this picture? She's one of the teachers that I learned this from. And she's like, Sarah, you got to realize their brain is so full of just language and interpreting from one language to another that even if they're looking at you, they might not be looking at you in that second. And so you want to hold that point for as long as you can. And I started noticing the EL teachers and what they were doing. They weren't just pointing, they were holding that point. And I was like, so obvious. Why didn't somebody tell me that early on in my career? Another example. The word substitute, we've all used it. We all know what the casual word for substitute is, right? So in my classroom, hey students, please substitute 6, plug in 6 for x into the equation y equals 24 minus x. And then I'm going to hold the point where appropriate. So first tip for success is let's accelerate learning. It is really possible to teach simultaneously previous grade material and current grade level material. Let's say you're in high school and you don't assume students remember what the circumference of a circle is. You can use circumference and say distance around the circle, and you can do that move with your hands and make a circle with your hands. Pairing language can help you not only teach current vocabulary, but assure that students understand what past vocabulary looks like. I'll give you an example of a word I started doing. I paired this with notation, but also early arithmetic. So here's a problem. 3/4 divided by 1/2. I was also a middle school teacher. And if you take a look at this, if I say, students, what's 3/4 divided by 1/2? Old Sarah from way back in the day might have done, like invert and multiply and all the stuff. But new Sarah, who's learned a few things or two, just made language tweaks. And I started doing things like this. How many of your students don't know that fraction bars are division? And so not only would every fraction bar that I see, I would write next to it a division symbol over and over and over again. After a month or two of doing this, do you know what no student forgets ever in their life? And I wouldn't tell them what should I write. I would just keep writing it. And I would keep putting notation and pairing notation with them. A second thing that I would do is I would use words to do this. I don't know if you know this, but when they're in elementary school, I was never in elementary school. One of the ways they think about division, there's a couple ways, but they think about division as how many groups. And so I stopped saying division. And I would read this way. Hey, students, I want to know how many groups of a half fit into 3/4. How many groups of a half fit into 3/4? We're going to divide 3/4 by half. How many groups of a half fit into 3/4? That pairing language is building conceptual knowledge. So not only can it accelerate learning, but it can build conceptual knowledge, and it's taking previous learning and applying it to fractional learning in 6th grade. So you can solve this in a variety of ways, but another word that I stopped saying was equals. And I would say, how many groups of a half are in 3/4? Well, that's the same as 3 1/2. And so if you're like, how do I do that? Well, then the other part of this is not only are you saying those words, you're going to represent that. So I'm going to show you how that changed my classroom. When I said how many groups of a half fit to 3/4, how many halves fit into that, I started drawing pictures. There's 3/4. Hey, students, how many groups of half are in 3/4? And we counted them out. There's one group of a half. There's not another full group. There's just half of a group. So there are 1.5 groups. Guess what? I didn't have to invert and multiply once to get that answer. I just had to think about it conceptually. So let's practice. You guys ready? If you're watching the recording of this, I just want you to pause and say something out loud. Hopefully you're watching it with something, say something to people. Those of you watching with me right now, I'd love for you to put something in the chat. What's something that we could pair in this picture? What's something we could say an academic term and a casual term? Don't think too hard. It can be about anything. What's something that we could pair and say? Ooh, someone's pairing color. There is a blue U shape. There's a blue U, a blue parabola. Love it. By the way, did you see how I took the word U? The person wrote in the chat. And what did I pair with it? I paired the word parabola. But I also paired a color. We'll talk about that in a minute. Anybody got anything else that we could pair in this picture you put home?
The line crosses the parabola at 3,7.
Oh, so the red line, the red linear equation, crosses at, and I know you can't see where I'm pointing, so I'm going to use my pen there. It crosses the parabola, the curve at 3,7. Oh, I did a lot of pairing in that one little sentence there. Thank you, Stephanie. So a lot of this just takes practice, like thinking through, and this is a great 10-minute PLC activity. Put up something and practice together. What are all the different things we could pair? What might students say? And then how could we pair that? Just start practicing things that you can do. To get good at this, you actually have to practice. And doing it with at least one other person is really going to improve your ability to do this. So if you want to accelerate learning, a really easy way to do that is to start whatever's you're doing that's previous learning, pairing in the casual definition and inviting them in. A lot of time what that does for students is they're like, oh yeah, I remember that now. It's the distance around the circumference. So let's talk about how you can design for success by engaging your students. So how can you do these simultaneously? Well, earlier I told you is you don't want to even start pairing until you've made it safe to engage. And there are several routines that I call safe. What do I mean by safe? It means you can't get any of these wrong. If students can't get the answer wrong, guess what? They start talking. If they think they might get it wrong, then they just wait for the 5 people in the room that always talk and let them talk. If you want everybody to talk, then start using one of these routines every day in your classroom. When you start using safe routines, every student starts talking. So I'm going to tell you about 2 of them. Because if you want students to talk at all, start using language with you, casual or otherwise, you have to make it safe for them. So which one doesn't belong? Which one doesn't belong is a routine where all of them don't belong for different reasons. This is a real life picture from my real life classroom. I love this routine for building vocabulary. And as students say things, if they don't know the terms, I'm going to start building in the terms. But what else do you notice about my which one doesn't belong? I don't know if you notice anything else about it, but every which one doesn't belong that I do, the 4 quadrants are always labeled A, B, C, D, but they're also always in 4 different colors. And I'm going to talk about why I do that. Alana Horn has written a book about motivation in mathematics. She's a researcher out of Vanderbilt University. And one day she tweeted, color coding is a strategy I don't think math teachers use enough. Color coding parts of a shape and labeling it, highlighting parts of a calculation, etc. It's a really good visual support for explanations. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you what the multilingual research says about it. Color coding is a phenomenal way to pair terms. A lot of times students don't know the word horizontal and vertical. You can say vertical and horizontal all day. You can say x-axis and y-axis all day. You can have an X and Y there. They still don't know what you're talking about. But if you say, see that red line, the y-axis, students start coming in. So when I started intentionally making graphics that I made, parts of it in different colors so I could pair that language and invite them in, it meant that I didn't always have to do a long point. I could be across the room and be saying, oh, the red axis, the red line, the green line, the x-axis, the y-axis, the vertical red line. So when I get a which one doesn't belong, they often look like this. And I'm like, what I know from the research on multilingual learners is that students are not able to say quickly up or left. So if they can't say that quickly, there's a whole bunch of students that beat them to answering this, and they're left 10 seconds behind, but they think they're 3 years behind, and they think they're dumb. And they're not dumb, their just language is 10 seconds behind. So how can you normalize the language so they can give us their really good ideas? So what I have found useful, this helps for both colorblind and non-colorblind students, is to color code it and also put A, B, C, D there. Even adults will say the red box doesn't belong because, and the research says in the first 100 words that everybody learns, think about the 5-year-olds in your life, the 2-year-olds. What are the first words they learn? Are color words. Our multilingual learners often know color words, but they don't know any other words. So they can say the red thing, and then they can say a casual idea about that. I'm telling you, you make that simple tweak, you'll start to things change. By the way, movement engages students in discourse as well. So in my room, I have these color-coded, which one doesn't belong on the walls. They stay up all year. But instead of telling them to go, I just have them go to one part of the room and we do the speaking in that part of the room. And so if this is up, students will say, oh, A doesn't have a corner. And I'll be like, oh, A has a point, a vertex like the rest, but it's a straight angle and it's not bent to make a corner. And I will put words in there and I will annotate them and say them and continue to put things in there. So you don't have to color code the background. You can also color code something like this. Another safe routine. In fact, this has slowly become one of my favorite. One of the best formative assessment ones you can do, and it's safe. I call it tell me everything you know about. And I give it a number. Tell me 14 things you know about. And then I show them something. So I'm going to show you a picture. I want you in your head to guess what are the first 5 things students are going to say about this. You guys ready? Hey, students, tell me everything you know about this. I want to know 15 things. In the chat or out loud, tell me what you think the first 5 things students will say. If you're watching the recording, pause the recording and make a guess what you think students will say.
The U is upside down.
The U is upside down. You would be wrong.
I see red.
These are the things they say first. They almost always see red. There's always smart Alex that say there's numbers. And you know what I do? I write down everything they say. Because you know what the research says? The first 4 or 5 things we see aren't that academic. We have to get past them in order to get to the academic. And so you want to celebrate when they say red and numbers, you want to write it down, because that's just their brain clearing out the cobwebs so they can get to the meat of things. If you said, no, I want mathy things, kids shut down because they think there's a right answer. So just record it and then start asking, and guess what they say next? Sarah, you ready? There's a U shape. Guess what I do? I color code it. I put the casual word down and I put the academic word down. I pair those. There's a high point. I grab a different color marker. Yes, there's a high point. There's a maximum. That's the vertex. I'm telling you, you do this for 5, 7 minutes as a start in your classroom. Watch the culture change. Watch how much you learn about your students and watch how much vocabulary you build in just a little bit of time. And this isn't about take out your notebooks and write down these definitions. That's just compliance. This is them building things. Do you know what my students always say? I allow cell phones in my high school classroom. Can I take a picture of that? And I say yes. Do you know why I say yes? Because I go down to the lunchroom. You know what they're doing? They're zooming in on their phone to pictures like this. The social studies teachers are like, why are your students always looking at math on their phones? Like they're complaining about their students looking at math. And I'm like, better that than some video game or TikTok or whatever else. By the way, one of the discussion supports is to press for details. The most frequent question you should ask in your classroom is what else, what else, what else, what else? That's where the magic comes from. It's not the first 5 things. Great, what else? What else, what else? That's why I always give them a big number, 10 or more. I usually don't give 10 because 10 is too big of it. Like it's the number 10. Everybody says 10. So I say 9 or 11 or 12 or 15. I also use these as discussion supports, as questions. I have them give me more details. What do you mean by a U shape? And I have them trace it in the air. And some other student might say parabola. Tell me everything you know about this number. You'd be amazed how much they can say about this. This is one class, everything that they said. In there are conceptions that you can build off of. Tell me everything you know about this. Tell me everything you know about this. You can talk about area, perimeter, height, length. You can talk about all kinds of things in one thing. Here's another place I love Tell Me Everything. Michael Pershon wrote a book called Worked Math Problems, where you give a student, you don't tell them how to do the problem. You do the entire problem, and then you say, tell me everything you know about this. And you ask targeted questions. That's how I learned all the math I learned. Anybody old enough to have gone to the back of your book to look for the answer and then figure out how they figured it out? There's a lot of learning in that. So, third success goal. You want to center students as learners. You want to go after their individual needs. And more importantly, you want to use a learning target that LA Unified School District, for their math teachers, had the following a learning target for the adults in the system. This was their learning target. I, the teacher, can center my students in my classroom as powerful mathematicians. Like, how do I make them feel like they're the mathematician and it's not me? And that's what they centered their professional development around. So I'm going to give you a way that pairing language can do that in your classroom. You ready? This is where the magic happens, and you start to make students believe they're smart. Seriously, pairing language started to make my students feel like they already knew the language that they didn't know. And I had students in my Algebra 2 class that were 3rd grade level in math at best. It was simple tweaks. All of a sudden, they thought they were powerful. And so when I'm going to do a problem right now, and there's going to be 2 students who are going to say something. And I've asked Sara to be student A. And she's going to just use casual language because she doesn't have academic language yet. And I've asked Stephanie to be student B. And she's that smarty pants who always uses precise language and wants to show off their precise language. And there's lots of other students in the room that fit all kinds of categories. But here's how I want to normalize everything for both of them. And so I'm going to give a problem just to the 2 of these people. And then I'm going to ask the rest of you, and if you're at home, you're going to talk to the people, pause the video. What do you notice me, the teacher, doing in this setting? And what is the impact that that could have on a class if we did this all the time? All right, I'm going to see if I can do this. I don't know if you've noticed, but I have a little bit of a cold, and all I want to do is blow my nose. And so I'm going to do that quick. I'm sorry. All right, I'm on it. Here we go. Hey, class. I want to tell you to tell me everything you know about this graphic here. All right, you've had 4 or 5 minutes to think about this. Does anybody have anything they want to start with? It can be anything.
The blue one is the ones they're stacked on each other. There's 4 of them stacked up.
Oh, the blue one. There are 4 boxes. The height of this. Did I get that right, Sarah?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you were trying to say? That there's 4 boxes that are going along and making a height there.
Yes.
What else did anybody notice?
The one on the right is representing 3/12.
So the one on the right, the green one, is representing, oh, so the fraction is 3 1/12. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 3 1/12 of that is green. And so the part to the whole of that shape is this. By the way, all right, I'm going to end scene, and we can keep going. And I would keep going in my classroom. This is a graphic to represent 1/3 plus 1/4, and to build language and conceptual understanding of that. But that's not what I'm teaching today. But I want you to think about and put in the chat or unmute, and not Sarah and not Stephanie. And if you're watching the recording, to stop and pause the video. What did you notice me doing? And what's the impact of that on the class? So is there anybody willing to come off mute and share anything that you noticed or impact with us? Or you can put it in the chat.
You repeated what they said to you.
A long time ago, someone told me you should repeat or they won't listen. And I think there is a time in my class where I do that. But when I'm trying to build academic vocabulary, it's not that. So I'm going to repeat it because I'm going to honor it. What else did I do? Thank you. That was good. I used the correct vocabulary. Like in Sarah's case, she didn't know the correct vocabulary, so I used it. You know what's magic about this? You know what happened in my class? Students assumed Sarah had used that word and not me. They assumed she had started from the beginning saying the height was 4. Seriously. All of a sudden, I centered her for all the other students in the classroom. See all those students on the bottom as having powerful language. They didn't realize, because I didn't say to the class, hey, what's the word for the ones stacked on top of each other? What that does is make her look like she doesn't know. But instead, I restructured my room to center her as powerful. What else did you notice me doing? Yeah, somebody said in the chat, I added precise language so that you all could follow along and understand and learn the precise language. I annotated, always super important. That's part of the whole point thing. I repeated, I clarified, stacked and height. What did I do with Stephanie? Stephanie is the one that most people don't get right. If Stephanie says what she says, half to 2/3 of the class have no idea what she said. If I just repeated what she said, they have no idea. So what am I going to do to invite the rest of the class in? I'm not going to say all the time, who can explain what Stephanie said? I'm just going to repeat what she said because I know what they need to hear that. So here's the trick. If somebody says casual language to me, I'm going to revoice what they said because that's a discussion support. I'm going to revoice it, but I'm going to revoice it with precise language. If someone uses precise language with me, I'm going to revoice it with casual language. Did you see I literally counted out the 12ths? Did you see I wrote part and whole? Do you even hear how I said the fraction 3 1/12? Thank you, Graham Fletcher. But I did a lot of things to invite the rest of the learners in. This is why I do pair language 100 times an hour, because I'm always pairing language. Pairing is one of the best things I've ever done to support ELs. I always use it. I pair math with non-math academic terms. For every unit, I develop a list of 5 to 10 terms and pair each with a casual definition. Like, I don't assume I'm going to be able to do this. So every unit, I say, what are the terms in this unit? And then before I start the unit, I've already decided what the casual definition might be. Because if you think you're going to be able to know how to do it in the moment, we get tongue-tied in the moment. When you start, don't pair them more than one time a sentence, because you'll just stumble and you're not going to be good at it yet. It'll come out clunky. You want to pair both out loud, but also in writing. You want to annotate your things. And then hold your point and point at the thing that you're talking about. If you want to do this and you actually want to be intentional, I've put together a 1-page that you can use with the unit. Feel free to adapt it. And you can what are the standards and benchmark? What's the unit vocabulary? What's related vocabulary from prior to this unit that I might use? And then make a list of 10 to 15 of the most important words in the unit. And then create a plan. They have new way of calling this as plain language. Is the reason I'm telling you that. And then after you have a list of 15, you're going to say, whoa, I can't handle 15. What are 2 that I'm going to start with? You're going to start small. So what did I do for Anchor Standard 2 in our new standards? I went and made a list of the K-12 22 words that I thought were important in that Anchor Standard. And then I made a list of plain language to go along with all those. You can steal these. I also made an elementary list from the same thing. In elementary, these are really the only words you need. By the way, do you know how I made the plain language things? I used my friend AI. And I put in these 10 words and said, hey, AI, create 2 to 5 plain language definition phrases for each term. Assume an elementary level vocabulary in the person hearing this. And then there's a few of them that I switched. And I had to tweak the ChatGPT prompt. But if you don't know what to say because you're too smart in math and you just know precise language, then use your cheats. There's a 6-8 list. There's a high school list. Super easy to do this thing and to get started. So, by the way, if you're a high school teacher, you probably also want the K-5 vocabulary in front of you as well, because they also have to be good at that. And they're not. So that's accelerated learning. Every time you say certain, you're going to say 100% sure. And you're going to pair those things in as well. So the goal of this is to center our students as the powerful mathematician and not put the focus on us. And when you pair casual math language with precise math vocabulary, things will change. So I'm going to end with a story. It's a quick story. But even though I know a lot and I have a 30-year head start on you, when you peel that orange, there's still another peeling that needs to happen. So this is something that happened in my last year of teaching high school math. We were in a probability unit, and I was trying to collect between my classes 1,000 pieces of data. So students were, because when you have lots of data, you get more accurate experimental data. So students were partnered up and they were rolling dice. And I'm like, quick. I want you to record and tally how many of these numbers that you're getting. Quick, tally. And I'm going around the room and I'm trying to encourage every set of partners to get like 50 sets of data. Tally, because the bell's going to ring and I want to collect all these. So the end of the hour, I collect all these. And then I am going to take all these and put them all together. So I start with the first one, and this is what it looks like. Great. I'm like 9, 2, 8, 4, whatever. Then I go to the next one, and it looks like this. But I kind of have an idea. I'm like, okay, 1, 3, and then I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2. And then I go to the next one, and this is where I knew I got it wrong that day. And we can laugh, but I literally cried. Because what do students want to do? They want to please us. And these were seniors in high school who did this. And you know what they didn't know? The word tally. And so every time they did this, think about the heavy load on their brain to have to figure out how to spell tally every single time to do this. And what could have I easily done? Hey, students, today we're going to tally. There's lots of ways to tally. You can tally however you want. Common way is to put them in sets of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. But if you know another way to tally any way you want. It would have taken me 3 seconds to pair that notation and given them permission to do anything. Often we make it harder on students who need us the most to engage in math. And they're just trying to please us. All students want to learn. And that was a day that I got it wrong in my class. So I've kept these 3 strips of paper as a reminder to myself that I can do better. I don't get mad at myself. I just know I'm always growing. So back to this story, and last thing I'm going to say is this. Remember I said I solved this kid's problem in 15 seconds? This is the day I got it right. He walked into my room and said, hey, I need help with this. And I said, great, read what you need to do. And the student said, in problems 1 through 6, find the real solutions for each equation. And I said, yeah, find the real solutions, the number answers of each equation. And he said, great, I know what to do. And he sat down and did it all. What was his problem? He didn't know the word real and he didn't know the word solutions. I solved it in a matter of seconds. Had I thought, wow, you're not a kid that typically looks like you'd be in pre-calculus. Let me show you and remind you how to do all the algebra. I would have diminished and done a microaggression to this kid that he is a super smart, brilliant kid. So I want to encourage you to think about pairing language. The spring is the best time to do it because you're rusty and you get all of it worked out now. Like, do it now. Don't start in the fall. There are success goals for all of that. You can go back and grab all the things that I shared with you and do some fun things with it. Everything from my first webinar is in the folder. I'm doing a webinar this time next week on the 3rd and last one for this school year. I put some more boxes because I want to do some more sessions next year. If you like these sections and you're actually using them with people in your sphere of influence, let me know and I'll do more sessions on this next year. And continue this series on supporting students with their 6 modalities of language. So